Shalom, friends. Welcome. This is Eliyahu Shear from Chesed Ve'emet, www.lovingkindness.co. Today we're learning Tanya, written by the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who lived from 1745 to 1812. And this is basically the Bible code of Chabad Hasidut. But within that, we must remember that there is something for every single person to learn from in this wonderful book, which basically tells us the secrets of the soul. There's so much psychology involved over here, so much understanding of life, that anybody who wants to get a grasp of what it means to connect with one's soul, connect with one's nation, to connect with God, the Tanya fulfills all of these requirements. And basically, we're at this point in time in chapter 4, we're making use of the online version of the Tanya, which can be found on Chabad's site, chabad.org, as you can see over here in front. And the edition is actually published by the Kohot Publication Society, and we're making use of this edition with their permission. So we're in chapter 4, and what we've been speaking about up until now in this chapter is that what we're required to do is to connect our 10 soul powers with everything that we do in Torah and Mitzvot. And basically what happens is that the Torah is the garment of godliness, of God. God invests himself in the letters of the Torah. And so when we study the Torah, we are studying the mind of God, so to speak. So there's a little bit of a catch over here. On the one hand, the letters themselves are the godliness. The letters are God, as so to speak. If we talk about who God is, when we examine these letters, when we study these words, we understand that this is God himself. And on the other hand, we speak of it as being that the letters are also the garment in this physical world for God to invest himself in, so that when we are reading the words of Torah, we are touching upon the garments that God has used in the physical world to clothe himself, so that we can grasp him. And at this point in time, the Baal HaTanya has explained to us that the Torah is compared to water and not like light. And the reason is because that light is the idea of when light leaves its source, then the light that we have at another place is not exactly the same light that exists within the source itself. It has left the source, and in fact is of a lesser level than the source itself. However, water is something that the nature of water is that wherever water is, the nature is for it to go from a high place to a low place. And no matter where we find the water in the low place, we can be certain that the water that is now in the low place is exactly the same water that was in the high place. And so therefore, the water is the comparison that we use to define what the Torah is. The Torah is water, which comes from a high place, which means from God, up in the highest heavens, meaning in the spiritual heavens, not literally in the sky. And as it descends into this world, it descends to the same degree as it exists above. So what we have here in the Torah that we study, that we're looking at now, these words, or whether they're words of the Gemara, whether they're the words of the Chumash, whether they're words of a tzaddik who wrote a book, or the words that we're reading right now today, we can be certain of one thing. These are the actual makeup of who God is. We're learning about the mind of God, and we're learning more about what we're required to do in this world in order to fulfill the divine will. And so we said over here basically that Kach HaTorah Yarda Mimakom Kavoda. And so it was that the Torah descended from the place of its glory. It came from the supernal level. And this is the will and the wisdom of Hashem. The Torah that we have is the actual will of God. God is saying to us, don't steal. This is his will. Don't murder. That's his will. Whatever the mitzvah is, study Torah. This is also God's will. And this is the wisdom of God, which means although we might not understand certain things, but still, this is the wisdom of God. And the Torah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed is He, everything is one. The words that we're looking at, This is the words of God. It's all one. It's all the same. It's like water descending from a high place to a low place. And there is no thought that can grasp God at all. This is the fascinating verse that we read coming from various holy sources, like from the Zohar, for example, and other places like that, where we see this concept discussed, that no thought can grasp God at all. This is a very interesting idea. Many people say, for example, that they can't understand God. So therefore, they're not prepared to observe all the mitzvot. What reason is there to not have to deal with this? Why do I have to deal with the mitzvah of not eating milk after meat, for example? It doesn't make sense to me. Or, for example, why can I not mix wool and linen together? It doesn't make sense to me. Or why can't I eat a pig, chazir? It also doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand this God who has decreed all of these laws which don't seem logical to me. And of course, the answer that we give to such a person is, well, if you did understand God, wouldn't that detract from one's service to this almighty creator of existence? If we really did understand everything about God, well, of course, if we did, we would be God. If we really understood God, we would be God. Because if we did understand God, and then we brought everything down to a completely logical level, we could even make God lower than ourselves. Because after understanding him so well, we could ultimately say that now that I understand him, I found a reason as to why, to show that I don't really have to do exactly what it is that he has told me to do. So in fact, not understanding God is a healthy sign that says to us, I realize that I'm far less than the greatness of the creator of the universe. Where is the greatness of this creator? In the Torah. And no thought can grasp him. So no matter what we try to do, no matter how much we try to meditate and to grasp who God is, we can really only come up with a fraction, just a small measure, to understand a little bit of the greatness of God. But in reality, no matter how much we try, there is nothing that we can do to grasp who God really is. Umisham nas'a v'yarda b'seiser hamadregos. And from there, the Torah descended through the secrets, in a secret manner, from level to level, mimadrega le madrega, from level to level, b'hishtalshelus ha'olamot, through the chain-like descent of all the worlds, which means to say that when God created the universe, if we want to understand this on a deeper level, we can open up, for example, the Otzrot Chaim, or the Eitz Chaim, written by Rebbe Chaim Vital, the pupil of the holy Arizal, in which he describes in great detail exactly how the physical world came into being, something that we cannot really understand. We could speak about it as being a big bang if we want to, and we could still get away with it, because although there could be this action or reaction of something happening which bursts, that begins the process of creation, well, it wasn't something that was simply out of control. Rather, it was an event that was completely in control of the creator. God had set up a spiritual universe in which he began to cause worlds to descend one from the other. It first began with this high world, which is called Adam Kadmon, and then it descended to a lower level through chain-like events that caused one thing to unfold from the other, and ultimately it resulted in the world of Atzilut, and then it went down into the world of Bria, and then it went down into the world of Yetzirah, and then the unfolding continued into the world of Asiya, into the physical world of Asiya, which is where we found ourselves today. And through all of these unfolding events, the unfolding of all the worlds, we come into existence, and the Torah comes into existence even in a physical world, into a physical aspect. And this is how the Torah is coming into the world, and it's just the same as water flowing from a high source to a lower source. There's no difference between the water in the high place and in the low place, and there's no difference in the Torah between where it came from the very high place into this lower world. As he says over here, it was this chain-like order of interconnected spiritual worlds, explained more fully in chapter 2. The Torah descended through all these levels. until eventually the Torah became garbed into physical things and into matters of this world, which means to say that eventually the Torah becomes garbed, like with garments. Real garments surround the aspects of Torah knowledge in physical activities, which means to say, for example, when we're going to be putting on tefillin, or we're going to be wearing tzitzit, or we're going to be eating matzah on Pesach, or we're going to be shaking a lulav and esrog on Sukkot, whatever the mitzvah is that we're going to do, or obviously taking a coin and giving it to tzedakah. All of these things are actually the Torah itself, which has been materialized into a physical aspect in this world. And the Torah then defines what these things are in their physical capacities as they pertain to their spiritual reality. And so therefore, when the Torah says, for example, give tzedakah to the poor person, it's not just a physical reaction that's taking place, but rather there are spiritual activities happening within the spiritual worlds according to the rules that God has decreed in all of existence. And this ultimately results in a physical coin being taken from a person who owns it, who has it, and he gives the coin to the person who needs it. And as a result of this, God's will is fulfilled in the physical world in a physical aspect. And what are these garments that we're talking about? Shehein rov mitzvos haTorah, kekulan v'hilchoseihin, that they are the majority, they are the abundance of the mitzvahs of the Torah, or all of them, and they're all the halakhas that pertain to them. So, for example, when we learn about the mitzvah of giving charity, we learn that there is an order to the giving of charity. We may not just give charity to who we feel like it, although it's very nice. For example, we could give charity to save the whales in the sea if we want to. And I guess we're fulfilling a mitzvah of some kind to save nature. But on the other hand, if people are starving, people are suffering, do we consider that the needs of the whale in the sea to be more important than the person on the street who's dressed in rags? Well, we could think about it on a logical level, or we could think about it on a slightly different level of nature, and all different ideas could come in our minds. Well, what about, for example, the mitzvah of charity as it pertains to one's own family, or as pertains to the world in general, or pertains to my country, or pertains to the neighborhood that I live in? The Torah gives us rules. If we have $10 and that's all that we have available to give to charity, who should I give it to? And the halachas start to come into effect. The law starts to have an effect. Should I give it to my parents first? Should I give it to my child first? Should I give it to the brother, the sister, the cousin? What about people in the shul? Maybe the shul needs the money. Well, there are many, many laws that apply to this, and they are invested within the spirituality of the Torah as it exhibits itself within the physicality of life itself in the corporeal world. Nearly all the mitzvot involve material objects. Tzitzit are made of wool, tefillin of leather, and so on. Even the spiritual mitzvot involve material objects in their halachot, the laws governing their practical application. For example, the mitzvah of loving one's fellow, although essentially a spiritual mitzvah, as it consists of an emotion, love, demands that one aid his fellow Jew materially, financially, etc., these being concrete material expressions of a spiritual mitzvah. So we see that ultimately the physical world is simply a garb of all the spiritual concepts, taking the aspect of a physical reality in this world. And when we use that physical reality in this world the correct way, we invest the spiritual energy of what God wants there to be in the physical world. And also on the permutations of the physical letters which are written with ink upon the book. We have 24 books in the Tanakh. In the Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim, we have a total of 24 books that we have to study, and we have to become great in. We have to learn these books so that we understand what the will of God is. Torah, Nevi'im, Ukesuvim, as we just said, this is the Tanakh, the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim, the abbreviation, the Tanakh, what many people refer to as the full Bible. This is the 24. This refers to the 24 books of the Torah. As mentioned above, the letters and words contain the holiness of God's will and wisdom. This is an amazing concept. It means to say that when I'm studying the Torah, I'm involving myself in the wisdom of God. Kedei shetehei kol machshava tefisa bahen, in order that it will be that one's thought can grasp all of these things. And even the aspect of speech and action below, mimadregas machshava, and on the level of thought, tefisa bahen begins to grasp them, umislabeshes bahem, and it encloses itself within them. So this is what we say: by performing the commandments in speech and action, we are able to take that physical, which is really the spiritual, and turn it into something that is godly. And since it is that the Torah and its mitzvahs enclose all 10 aspects of the soul, which we already learnt about before, the Chabad, the Chochmah, Bina, and Da'as, and the seven midot, which is the Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. So all of Torah, all of the mitzvahs are clothing themselves on these 10 aspects of the soul. V'kol Tariag are Evareha, and all of the 613 limbs, Meirosha v'ad ragla, from its head right up until the legs, which means until its foot, which means to say from the highest level, which is the head, to its lowest level, which is the foot. Hare kula tzura b'tzura chayim is havaya mamash. Everything is bonded. Everything is bound up with the bond of life, with God Himself. V'or havaya mamash makifa umalbisha meirosha v'ad ragla. And the light of Hashem in mamash, really it is that it encompasses and it garbs and it encloses from head to the foot. As it's written, Tsuri echese bo, God is my rock in whom I take refuge. Ukasiv, again, what we mean over here when we say that God is the rock, we don't mean to say that He's a rock like we find a rock lying on the ground somewhere when we walk outside and there's a rock and we say, is this God? No, what we mean to say is just like it is that a rock is a protective place. For example, if we take like a cave or something, you take a large area of stone which surrounds this area which is called the cave, and a person is able to enter into this cave, then the cave acts as a protection. It's the rock that protects the person. So we call God the rock in whom we take refuge. And it's also written, as with a shield, God's will surrounds him. So again, we see that the Torah and the Mitzvot act as a shield, which is protecting both, of course, ourselves, and is also where God is Himself within the Torah itself. This is the will and the wisdom of the one, may he be blessed, meaning of God, who is enclosed in His Torah and in the commandments. We see at any rate that although God's wisdom and will are beyond man's reach, they are made accessible to him because the Torah is clothed in physical terms and its commandments are vested in physical objects. That means to say, we need to take a second look at all the physical objects that we have. And we have to realize that all of these things contain the spiritual potential, the spiritual power in order to do something with God's will. How am I using my physical things that God has given me in order to serve my Creator? Do I use them correctly? Or am I just making use of them for fun, for enjoyment, for things that satiate the body, instead of for things that are dealing with satiating the soul, for satiating God through our mitzvah performance? So, for example, do I take the etrog, the citron on Sukkot, and eat it because it is tasty? Or do I take the etrog and wave it about with a palm branch, a lulav, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of taking the lulav and the 4 species on Sukkot? When I take the 4 species, which are physical, and I wave them in a certain way, and I recite a blessing before that, I sanctify these particular physical objects, and I lift them up to God through the spiritual power that is invested within the physical item itself. On the other hand, if I simply eat the etrog instead of using it in the mitzvah performance, I fulfill no mitzvah whatsoever. On the contrary, I waste my money because etrogim are highly expensive. And if that's what I'm going to spend on an etrog just to eat it, then I have wasted my money in addition to the fact that I did not fulfill the mitzvah. So God blesses a person with a variety of things. God gives a person money, and he's able to purchase various things. He can purchase garments, for example, and he can wear these garments in the service of God. He can buy himself a beautiful suit, and he can go to shul, and he can look like a mensch, and he can look honored as he should look, somebody respectable. Or alternatively, he can go off and he can buy the latest fashion denims which have holes in them or whatever it is, and in this way he can show off his body to the world. He has to decide with the money that he has, he's going to purchase things, and he has to decide to what degree he's going to use these things to sanctify God, to serve God. Why do we have a home? To put up a mezuzah. We have a home so that we can put up a mezuzah. In other words, there is a mitzvah to have a mezuzah on one's home, on one's door. But if I don't have a door, I cannot fulfill the mitzvah of the mezuzah. So I say to God, please God, bless me with a home, not just so that I have a place to stay, but so that I can fulfill the mitzvah of mezuzah. I take everything that I have and I use it in the service of God. Imagine that. I can, for example, take my plates and my cutlery, my crockery, and I can use these things to serve God as if there was real spirituality involved in the item itself. I very much enjoy giving this as an analogy because sometimes I think of it myself, and it's certainly worthwhile for anybody who has difficulty with this particular concept to think about. I once read in Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan's book of Jewish meditation, I think that's where he brings it down, and he says over there that everything can be turned into meditation. Everything can be turned into godliness. Every physical thing that we have can be turned into the highest levels of spirituality. For example, he says, if a person feels that it's difficult for him to wash up the dishes after he finishes eating, so he puts the dishes in the sink and he hopes that the next day it will be washed. Either somebody in the family will wash it up for him, or magically overnight when he wakes up in the morning, the dishes will be washed. So he says to himself, I'm not going to wash the dishes at all. Says Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, think about it like this. Instead of thinking that way, take the dishes, and as you begin to wash them, think about how you are serving God. You are going to be eating food on those dishes. And on the food that you'll eat will be kosher. And you will recite a blessing on the food that you will eat. And you will be able to then use that energy from the food in order to serve God throughout the day. Whether it is fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzit or tefillin or davening, whether it's giving charity, one needs energy in one's body to perform all these mitzvot. One might be dancing at a wedding or whatever the case may be. I'm going to be using my physical body during the day to perform a variety of mitzvot. And I'm going to need energy to do that. I gain the energy from food that I eat. And in order to do that, I'm going to make the dish dirty. So when I now wash up the dish, I begin to think in my head about just how it is that I can serve Hashem through the food that I've eaten and all the things I'm able to do. Now I begin to thank Hashem for all of these things taking place. And in fact, I give sanctity to the crockery and the cutlery that I was using in order to eat the food, something so simple. And as I begin to clean the dish, I start to think to myself, since I'm cleaning the dish, I'm able to think to myself, I will now have a clean dish to eat on the next time to fulfill all of these mitzvot again. I will then be able to eat clean food again and be able to go through the same procedure in serving God. Suddenly, cleaning the dishes takes upon itself a whole new idea. No longer do I feel disgusted about cleaning the dish, or do I feel that I'm wasting my time. But on the contrary, I feel that as I'm beginning to do this, that I'm serving God through the food that I'm eating. But even more than that, I begin to see myself as serving God even as I clean the dish. And as I begin to move my hands around the dish, I begin to think to myself, yeah, God has given me a hand. And I'm able to use this hand miraculously with so many muscles, so many nerve endings, so perfectly that I'm able to clean the dish in the correct way. Many people in the world, God forbid, lack a limb or they lack a hand and they're unable to perform this. When I'm able to clean the dish, I begin to think in my mind that I'm grateful for the hand that I have in order to clean this dish. Suddenly, I invest my entire being. My mind is invested in the spirituality of a dish. And my mind and my body become invested in the spirituality of what it means to serve God through all the physical things that I have. Indeed, every single physical item that we have, no matter what it is, a table, chairs, a sofa, a car to drive in, the home to live in, the washing stand, the towel, the rubbish bin, whatever it is, when we look at it and we see it in the light that we should see it, in the spiritual light, in using it to serve Hashem, ultimately, we uplift everything from the physical world back to its spiritual reality. We begin to see God in the spiritual aspect in this physical world right here. And so therefore, this is the key. God invests himself within all physicality. He invests himself in the holy letters of the Torah. That when I read the Torah, I am connecting with the mind of God. And when I use the physical things in my physical life, just to do the things that I want to do, I'm able to connect with God on the highest of levels. In fact, perhaps as Aryeh Kaplan might say, that if a person were to do this, he could even connect to God on a very high spiritual level of meditation. Because as he begins to clean this dish, his mind is able to escape from the physicality that he is involved in. And instead, he begins to think about God, the holiness that exists within a dish, the fact that the dish can exist and always exist because God continues to bring the dish into existence every moment. Were God to take his mind off the dish for but a moment, the dish would disappear out of existence in just a second and would no longer have any existence whatsoever. And therefore, Amru, the rabbi said, Yafeh sha'a achatz b'tshuva u'ma'asim tovim ba'olam hazeh mikol chayei olam haba. Better is a moment or an hour, depending on how one understands the word sha'a. Better is a moment of tshuva, of repentance, and ma'asim tovim, and good deeds in this world than all of the world to come. Isn't this a beautiful statement? The rabbis are teaching us that it is better for a person to involve himself in tshuva and good deeds in this world, even for but a moment, than all of the world to come. Why is that? Ki olam haba, because the world to come, is that we enjoy the divine radiance, the divine presence, the radiance that exudes from godliness, from divinity. When we die, that's what we're going to see. Shehu ta'anuk hasaga, which is ultimately the pleasure of comprehension of when we're able to understand more about godliness. So our minds are able to drift, the soul is able to drift into the greatness of the godliness that exists at that point in time when the soul leaves the body. And it is impossible for any creation, afilu mehalyonim, even of the worlds above, meaning the angels, the souls, lahasig ki im ezo ha'ara me'or havaya, except they can only grasp just a minute illumination from the light of God. The highest souls, the highest angels can grasp only the smallest measure of the divine presence, which means that moment that the soul leaves the body and we're exposed to the godliness in front of us. Even the greatest souls, even the highest angels, can only grasp a glimmer of the light that is coming from this powerful force that we call God, the creator of all that exists. However, that's different from the physical world. And therefore, Nikra b'shem ziv hashchina. And this is for this reason. It is called the radiance of the divine presence, of the Shekhinah. What is the difference? What does it mean, a radiance? A person doesn't experience the Shekhinah herself. One experiences only the radiance of the Shekhinah, since it is no more than a remote gleam of the divine light. Aval HaKadosh Baruch Hu bichvoidoi uva'atzmo. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in his honor, his glory, and his real self, leis machshavet tfisa bei klal, no thought can grasp him at all. Which means to say that's the same expression that we used before. Nothing can grasp God. It doesn't matter how far we advance in all of our studies of Torah. And even if God promotes us, like in an army, we go from being a private and the major and ultimately the general and maybe even the chief of staff, who knows to what degree we go, even then we receive only a glimmer of the divine presence at that point in time, nothing more. It doesn't matter how great we can ever become. Ki im kashet fisa umitlabeshet besoira. Only when he grasps and he clothes himself in the Torah and the mitzvahs, then does he grasp and clothe himself in the Torah and its mitzvah, does he grasp and clothe himself in God himself. Only when a person apprehends and clothes itself in, when the letters are there inside the Torah and the mitzvahs, can one actually grasp God himself. Why? Because the Torah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu are all one, which means to say, when I'm studying Torah, I'm able to grasp godliness as it invests itself within the physical letters. I do not grasp the radiance of the Shekhinah. I grasp the Shekhinah herself. When I perform the mitzvah, I am involved in grasping the Shekhinah herself. I grasp God within the mitzvah. I see the godliness within the mitzvah. In the Zohar, it explains a very beautiful idea. And one can use this as a meditation anytime, certainly with charity, because charity is the key to seeing how it all works. But basically, the story goes like this. When a person gives charity, he might think that he's only involved in physicality. But the truth is, as he involves himself in this mitzvah, he is involved in the heights of spirituality. He actually maps out, he acts out the name of God as he gives his charity. Because the name of God consists of 4 letters, Yud, and then a Hey, and then a Vav, and then a Hey. The Yud is the coin, because the Yud is a small letter that looks just like a coin. The Hey corresponds to a hand. Indeed, the Hey is the 5th letter of the Aleph Beit, and being the 5th letter, it has a gematria, a numerical value of 5, just like there are 5 fingers on the hand. But more than that, because if one takes the letter Hey and switches around the letters, one can see that the Hey corresponds and consists of the letter Yud, which is inside the Hey, and the letter Dalet, which is on the outside of the Hey, which spell out the word Yad, which is hands. And also, the gematria, the numerical value of the word Yad, hands, happens to be 14, corresponding to the 14 bones that exist in the hand itself. And there is a reason why the palm is not included. The palm refers to the aspect of shalom, which is a different level altogether. But in the meantime, we have the hands. And what happens is the coin is placed into the hands of the giver. Then comes along the vav. And the vav, in Hebrew, the word vav means hook, because it's connecting. And what does it connect? The vav corresponds and looks like to the arm of the person. So we have the yud, which is the coin. We have the hey, which is the hand. We have the vav, which is the arm, which stretches out the hand. And we have the hey of the recipient, the hey, the hand of the recipient that is going to receive the coin from the giver. Which means to say, when I'm engaged in the mitzvah of charity, I act out the name of God and I bring godliness into the world as if the spiritual power behind the Yud K Vav K, the name of God, exhibits itself within the process of the giving of the charity. Indeed, this is how all mitzvot work. We can see it clearly with the mitzvah of charity, but with other mitzvot, the same thing applies, which means to say that when I'm engaged in a mitzvah, I am engaged in the touching of God himself. I am touching God. I am experiencing the actual divine presence. When I die, I experience a glimmer of the divine presence. But while I'm alive, I experience the divine presence herself within the words of the Torah that I study, the light of the letters illuminate my eyes that I see the godliness, and the performance of the mitzvot allow me to touch and experience God himself within the physical world. And so that is exactly why we said earlier above, Yafeh sha'a achas b'tshuva u'ma'asim tovim. Better is a moment of tshuva and good deeds ba'olam hazeh, in this world, mikol chayei olam haba, than all of the world to come. Better for a person to be engaged in the study of Torah and the fulfillment of mitzvahs in this world, even for a moment, because it compares like nothing when we compare it against the glimmer of the divine presence, which means to say, which is greater? The performance of the mitzvah. The mitzvah is what it is, the greatness of touching Hashem. I'm reaching out, I'm feeling and experiencing the divinity. Whereas in the world to come, I will experience a glimmer of light of who Hashem is. And that is less than the quality of Hashem himself. Hashem he exhibits himself, he invests himself within the letters of the Torah and within the mitzvot themselves. And so he continues, he says, the Oraisa v'Kudsha Brihu kula chad, that the Torah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, everything, all of this is one. Hence the superiority of Torah and mitzvot in this world over the life of the world to come. In the world to come, the soul grasps only a glimmer of godliness. In this world, through Torah and mitzvahs, it is united with God himself. And even though it is that the Torah is garbed within things that are in this lower world, physical things, I sit at a table, I sit on a chair, I sit at the table, I eat physical food, I drink physical things. Everything that I do is all about physicality. I dress my physical body. Everything is physical. It is only these material things that man's intellect grasps when studying Torah, not the essence of God's will and wisdom. Yet, this is compared like a person who is hugging the king, as an example. Now think about this for a second. When a person is hugging the king, he is hugging the king. We do not say that he is hugging the garments of the king, but surely the king is dressed in garments. Yet we are hugging the king. Because why? It doesn't matter if the king wears garments or not. When I'm in the presence of the king and I place my hands and my arms around him, then I'm hugging the person who is inside the garments. That there is no difference in the level of the closeness and the cleaving of the king. And it makes no difference whether he is hugging him and he has one garment, or when we hug him and he has many garments. Because the king, the body of the king is inside the garments. And so therefore this is the same thing with the study of Torah and the fulfillment of the mitzvot. When we are studying Torah, when we are fulfilling mitzvot, it is as if we are hugging the king who is wearing garments. And it doesn't matter how many garments there may be, we are still hugging the king himself. We are still experiencing the closeness to the king, as opposed to the light of the divine presence, which is experienced by the soul when the soul leaves the body. Similarly, when a Jew embraces God's wisdom in Torah study, the fact that his wisdom is clothed in material robes is irrelevant. Another point understood from this analogy, in the study of Torah, man is also embraced, enveloped, and encompassed by God's wisdom that the Torah contains, as will be explained further in chapter 5, as the Alter Rebbe continues. So basically, there are two sides to the story of hugging. When I'm hugging the king in return is hugging me, which means to say, when I embrace the Torah, I study the words of the Torah, I fulfill those mitzvot, I hug the king hugs me back. And that is a double win. We both win off the situation. On the one hand, I connect with the godliness, with God, and on the other hand, he connects back with me. And there's a double exuberance. There's a double ecstasy that's taking place here. There's the feeling that not only am I hugging him, but he is feeling happy hugging me. And as a result of that, I'm experiencing a double level of happiness, satisfaction, and ecstasy in cleaving to God, just from the study of Torah, just from the fulfillment of a mitzvah. And indeed, that is how a person should be, that when he is engaged in the fulfillment of a mitzvah, when he is engaged in the study of Torah, he should feel this happiness, knowing that he is clearly connecting with God at that point in time. We have concluded our lesson in Tanya for today, and I thank you very much for joining me. I'm Eliyahu Shear. You can find me on www.lovingkindness.co. If you've enjoyed the Shear, please do like the video and subscribe to my channel. Click on the bell so that you'll be notified of future videos. Make a positive comment. It will help me a lot and encourage me, and I'll know that I'm giving something back to you that perhaps you're enjoying and growing from it as well. As much as I grow from giving the shiurim, I always hope that everybody else has the opportunity to grow as well together with me. So if you would like to be in touch with me, of course, please do be in touch via my website and become a partner in the activities that we're involved in. Do become a part of it and take a part in what we're doing. If you'd like to know more, just be in touch with me, and I'd be happy to be in touch with you, answer any questions you have, and create a relationship. In the meantime, I say thank you for joining me, and I wish you all the best. Shalom, shalom. Bye-bye.